You mentioned that how Larry likes Stephen King, and that is, to me, something that I've really liked about this book and that has stayed with me. This recurring, these books keep showing up, and it's part of Larry's kind of creepy personas that he carries around these books, and he has all these when if police are looking at his investigating in his house, they notice he has all these horror novels,
which makes him seem more guilty.
Mm-hmm. And there's a funny passage where he is talking to another guy who is selling a direct TV dish, and says, what are you reading? And he's like, oh, I saw that movie. Well, if you get a dish, you don't even need to read anymore, because then you can just see the movies, and it's pretty funny. And I was wondering, first of all, why you chose Stephen King, and also when you were growing up in a small town, if reading all the time was something that people viewed as a little suspect or unusual, like it seems like people do with Larry.
They did. Honestly, I felt guilty reading. It seemed unmanly.
Well, that's something that Larry's dad really points out. He's like, get out of the house, stop.
Right. Don't read. And my mother actually encouraged me to read. I mean, that was not something Larry and I have in common.
Mm-hmm.
But my uncles and my cousins and brother all hunted,
mm-hmm.
and I wasn't a big hunter. I didn't really want to do it. I would rather have read.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one time I did go on a deer drive, and I saw this guy. I didn't know him, but he had on camouflage pants, and in the pocket of his pants he had a Louis L'Amour novel, and it blew me away that somebody could read and hunt at the same time. I never brought books into the woods because you wouldn't be paying attention. You may miss the animal you're supposed to kill. But after that, I began to bring books into the woods,
mm-hmm.
and seeing that guy reading just made it okay. So it was a manly book. It was a western.
Mm-hmm.
But I read lots of science fiction and every Stephen King thing that came out. So, tell me your first question.
Well, why Stephen King?
Well, I just really mined my own life, for Larry, and as my said, I had a huge obsession with King. I would buy the hardback and the paperback when it came out, and any subsequent editions. I bought everything I could find. I had many copies of each of his books. I just loved his writing.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, I read his Playboy interview,
mm-hmm.
and he said in that interview, my writing is the literary equivalent of a Big Mac and fries. And I realized I needed to have a better reading diet, and I read at that point To Kill a Mockingbird
mm-hmm.
in a separate piece, but I still read the King novels and I love them.
Mm-hmm.
They're one of my guilty pleasures.
Well, you said how much Larry is. We've talked a lot about Larry, but a ton of this book is about Silas, the other character, the black man who Larry is friends with as a child, and then who goes on to become a cop. Is he inspired by anybody that you know? Or where did he come from?
He's the other point of view character. It's a third person he, not a first person I.
Mm-hmm.
So the camera follows him. I worried about writing from the point of view of a black man. I never tried it. Didn't know if I could do it. Didn't know if I should do it. But one of my African American friends suggested that I make him,
mm-hmm.
a black cop. We just talked about this novel one day. And he said, "Why don't you make him a black guy?" I said, "Wow, can I do that?" He said, "Yes, if you do it right.
Mm-hmm.
Just just get it right." And David, his name's David Wright, this friend, he read the novel for me in manuscript and found several places where I didn't get it right,
mm-hmm.
and told me and said, "Here's what he would think. Here's what he would say. Here's what she would say."
Mm-hmm.
So he really helped me.
Mm-hmm.
But it was nerve-wracking, and ultimately, I just stopped thinking about whether he was white or black. I wrote him as a man,
mm-hmm.
and that's when I was finally able to write him,
mm-hmm.
to give myself permission to write him.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of getting it right in terms of dialogue, there is a lot of, the dialogue is very colloquial of people who are from rural Mississippi. And do you feel like you have an ear for how people speak, or is that, how do you craft these sentences of these uneducated people living in a teeny little town in southern Mississippi? I mean, do you worry about being, did you worry about getting it right, or?
Way back when, the non-hunter, Tommy, that guy really wanted to fit in, so I pretended to like to hunt,
mm-hmm.
and I also listened to how people talked. I really paid attention because I wanted to fit in. But because I read so much, I knew for example, that you would say Eliza and I are going, not me and Eliza. Everyone I knew said me and Eliza are going. But from books I knew it was Eliza and I. But I wouldn't say it even though I knew it was right. And so I think I just listened real hard so that I would fit in better. And that has helped me now, writing dialogue. I don't do much dialect, but I try to make the dialogue sound as real as possible. And I still, I go home and there are all these wonderful Southern accents and all these great colloquialisms. So I still hear it a lot. That's a good thing about living in the South. I'm around my characters.
Well, your writing has been compared to kind of the big dogs of Southern literature, Faulkner and Flannery O'Connor and Harper Lee, and it seems as though you are pretty often described as a Southern writer. And I was wondering if you could just talk about that a bit, if there's something that makes a writer a Southern writer more than just being from the South or studying a book in the South, and also if that's a label that you embrace or that you are maybe a little skeptical of, or if you do consider yourself to be a Southern writer, in that tradition.
It comes and goes, yes and no. Some days I'm happy about it, other days I'm less happy. But I'm also, my first 2 novels are historical. So Southern writer, historical writer. Now, this one's being called a crime novel, and I wrote it as a crime novel. So now, crime, that's 3 genres or subgenres that I'm in. So, I think people want to pigeonhole writers just so they can understand them better and just maybe describe it better. But no, I think being a Southern writer is like being a left-handed pitcher in baseball. You do the same things, but with a kind of different flair. So I don't mind it today. Today I'm happy being here in Nashville. I don't mind it at all. And I get that question a lot.
Well, to us it's funny. Being in Nashville, we have readers from all over the country, but we do have a lot in the South, and we get really excited about a Southern novel, and we think it's great, and we know our readers are really interested in that. But I wasn't sure if,
Well, the problem is that, the most provincial place in the country is New York in terms of its attitudes toward the rest of the country. And one needs to be accepted in New York because that's where so much of the publishing is. Many of the publishing houses are there, and they have so many New York writers, and that's a hard market to get into. So for that reason, I don't like being called Southern, just because I think it shuts me out of certain markets. And I want to be, I want people to read this book. Definitely. So it bothers me when it's dismissed as a Southern novel or dismissed as a crime novel. It's really about the characters. The crimes happen off stage for the most part, so it's not really a crime novel.
Yeah, well,
I set out to write it that way, but didn't quite succeed. I think it really is a literary novel, but it's set in Mississippi, so it's a Southern novel. I think it's I hope it's many things.